seeing it, right? Oh, perfect. Go for it. Okay. I'm looking forward to talking to you today about our recent trip to Patagonia. The whole time we were in Neuquén province, which is in northernmost Patagonia. And we were between latitudes of, 34 and 36 degrees southern latitude. These are some views of some of the fabulous things we saw. The one on the left is a beautiful view of the Rio Lumne Valley going north towards the Lumne. Here's one of the fabulous violas we saw. This is a hybrid, Viola ex Blackslandiae. And this is a scene that could have been in the Jurassic Park movie with the Araucaria aracanas and the basaltic lava flow here that's columnar. So just to give you a little tip on hint of what we saw on our trip. Here's where we actually were. This is the map of our trip outlined in yellow. And you can see here where we went. We started off down here in Bariloche. We went over to a little town called Pilcaniu, which is out on the steppe. And this area here is in Rio Negro, northernmost Rio Negro. And then we went north up to San Martin de los Andes, Junín de los Andes, and further north, as we'll see in a minute. Before we go further north, let's look at a little bit about the geology of this area. Here's Volcan Battalia, which is in Chile, but it's right on the Argentine-Chilean border. And this is at 39 degrees south latitude. And here's Lumne, the town that we're going towards on this first part of the trip. You can see the Nazca plate here, which is the oceanic plate that's being subducted under the South American plate. And it's what's called a flat subduction, which means it's low angle. And that's what causes a lot of the volcanism that the Andes are known for. Here's one of the plants we saw on our first day on Cerro Catedral, which is the huge mountain and ski area that looms above Bariloche in the lakes. This is Calianthomoides Semi-Verticilliata. And this is a fabulous, unbelievable plant. We didn't see this in too many places, but you can see why people would want to grow this. Here's a close-up of the flower that Glenn and Patrice took. Here's another plant that's a signature plant of Patagonia, Oreopolis glacialis. We saw this in many places on our trip. It grows in the steppe and it grows at high altitude. It's a wonderful plant, as you can see. And here it is again on these slopes looking down the volcanoes. This highest one here is in Chile. The rest of these, this is Tronador, the Thunderer, which is right next to Cerro Catedral. But here's Oreopolis glacialis growing on the slopes. And here's our first viola, our succulent violas that we saw, Viola sacculus. You can see what a fabulous plant this is. These are fleshy little rosettes, sort of like sempervivums. And look at this, it's in full bloom. We were well above timberline here. We're at about between 8,000 and 9,000 feet. Here's a close-up of it that Glenn took. Amazing plant, and there were lots of them. Here's the other viola that's on Cerro Catedral, Viola petrea. You can see it's a little different. The rosettes are a little laxer and brighter green, and the flowers are huge. Look how big these flowers are, and they're sort of violet colored. So quite distinctive. And here's a close-up of it with darker, more violet colored flowers. Here's the Oxalis Adenophylla, which we did like Oreopolis glacialis. We saw all over the place. Lots of different color forms. You can see this is a big plant. This is over a foot across. They can be light violet, white, dark violet, and so on. Here's another Oxalis, Erythrorhiza. This is not as common, but still you see it in the alpine areas of Patagonia, quite a ways north and south. And here's the white form of Adenophyla. Isn't that spectacular? Beautiful. And this can be grown. This is currently growing in the Patagonian garden at DBG right now. And they were in full bloom this past summer. So be sure and check that out next June. Here's another little plant. We didn't see this in many places, Polygalas Laziana. And this was filling a crevice in the rocks on Cerro Catedral. Just beautiful. It's sort of a sky blue flower. And here's the group. We're on top of Cerro Catedral. You probably recognize this individual. He's very well known, Panayotti. And this was our guide. Marcella was using the student of hers to help show us around. Here's Patrice. And where's Glenn? I think this is Glenn. Here's Marcella. I'm back here somewhere. This might be me. Anyway, you can see what a spectacular view we had. It was a beautiful sunny day. And here's a view out to Lake Nawawapi, which is the fabulous lake that surrounds Bariloche. The lakes we see along the Andes are all glacial lakes. So they were all carved out by the moraine mountainous glaciers they had during the last ice age. Here's the close-up. Now we're in Pilcaniu, and this is the first Austral Cactus we saw. This is a close-up of Bertini. Beautiful plant. You can see this. These fill an ecological niche similar to Echinocereus in the United States and Mexico. Here's another cactus, Malwinia Patagonica. Beautiful white flowers. These are about 2.5 inches across. And very spiny. They form, in some places in Patagonia, they form big shrubs, 2 or 3 feet high and several feet across. Here's a close-up of the Malwinia Patagonica in fruit. And you can see these big fruits loaded with black seed, but they weren't ripe yet. Here's another violet, quite different than the ones we just saw. This is Viola Volcanica. And the soil it grows in, you can see it's made up mostly of volcanic tephra, large fragments of volcanic rock that have been blown out by a nearby volcano. In fact, in 2013, Volcan Kapale started erupting and went on and off for several years and deposited several inches of ash all over thousands of square miles. So people thought that was going to be a disaster for the plants, but instead, the nutrition that you get from the volcanic weathering of the fragments is very beneficial to the plants, and they're probably having some of their best blooming years ever. Here's a close-up of that same species, Viola Volcanica. You can see the tiny little flowers and the surreal geometrical shape of the plant. This is what fractals is all about when you look at something like this. Another Viola Columnaris. This one wasn't in bloom, but you can see it's much different. The rosettes stand upright for the most part and sort of grayish green. Here's one of the Juniellas, and there's many Juniellas. And as some of you know, we're growing some of them here in Denver already, but this is Cespitosa. Here in Colorado, we're growing Juniella succulentifolia. Yes, it is a succulent, and Micrantha. There's at least a half dozen more that we could be growing, and you can see why you'd want to grow it with a nice little bun mat like this with these beautiful flowers. Here's one of the oddball plants, Gammacarpa macrocephala. It's in a family all of its own in South America, and it doesn't look like anything we've grown in our gardens, and I don't know anybody growing this, so maybe one of you will be the first. Here we are further on in our trip. Now we're headed up this way to Alumne, and on that route, here I am looking at an Austro-Cactus we saw on the side of the road. This is a picture taken by Glenn and Patrice. And here's what I was looking at and got a picture of, Austro-Cactus Coxy. Those flowers are spectacular. I remember this. I was in Patagonia in 1988 and in the same general area. I remember these big plants hanging over the edge of cliffs because this is close to vertical. and how spectacular they were. And sure enough, they're still there. Here's an Ephedra Chile. These get big. This is probably 5 feet tall and 8 feet across. White fruits. It is hardy here. I grew it years ago, so it's available. Viola Volcanica is another form of this that we saw on this trip. See, the rosettes look sort of frosted. And here it is in full sun, and flowers are open here. Sort of a rose tint on the rosettes. Another Gammacarpa, Scaphogera. This is even at least as bizarre as the first one I showed you, but it's a beautiful plant. Look at the symmetry on this. It's amazing. Never seen anything like this before. Another Austro-Cactus Coxy. We saw a lot of these. This is a very common species in this part of Patagonia. And the flower color does vary a little bit from orange to more yellow. And the spination on the plants will vary too, as you'll see. All right, here we are from Lumne going up to Via Pygma. And in Argentine Spanish, double L's pronounced sh, so Argentines would pronounce this Villa Pygma. A beautiful area. We stayed on a lodge right by a lake. Very nice. Next morning, we're out looking at bulbs in an area, Zephyranthes mendocina. Fabulous plant. This would be hardy here if we could get the bulbs. So we'll look forward to that. You can see it's being pollinated by a bug. And here in the same area, we're in an Arakana Forest. This is our first one. These are just amazing. And they go all the way back to the day of the dinosaurs, about almost 300 million years. Fabulous plants. Orchids were here in the same area too. Rhodolirion anticola, but here's an orchid, Claria magellanica and Claria alpina. Awesome plants. Terrestrial orchids are something I'm getting more interested in. I've got 4 growing in my yard now. Here's a view of the scenery from this area. Another big glacial lake. And looking around, you can see the mountains. These are back in Chile now. And then below, you can see one of the volcanoes. This is Villarrica in Chile. And this, I believe, is Yaima, another large volcano north of Villarrica. Just fabulous scenery. Here's an Savia. It's a large group of plants, very desirable to grow. There have been a few of these grown in Britain and exhibited at some of their shows, but I don't know anybody growing these in the United States yet. But isn't this nice? Here's Panaeodium marcella standing at the base of a huge ancient Araucaria. Look at the trunk on this and look at the bark. This bark is bulletproof. It's really thick. Don't think anything's going to be eating that. And here are Patrice and Glenn with our wonderful bus driver, Gonzalo. Gonzalo had traveled quite a bit. He'd been on the team handball team for Argentina for a Pan American Games. So he'd been to the United States, spoke excellent English, and was a fun guy. Here we are in Volcan Battalia, outside of Villa Pygma. This looks like a caldera, but as it turns out, it was carved out by the glaciers. There was a geological study to determine that, because everybody thought it was a caldera at first. And a caldera is when a volcano blows its top, basically, and leaves a depression that gets filled in and creates a lake. Here's Marie coming up the slope, very steep slope. This is probably our toughest hiking day. And we were all pretty tired by the end of this day. Here's one of the things we saw on the trip, on the hike up, Viola Cotyledon. Just a fabulous plant. You can see it's a little bit different. There's over 40 species of these, and they go from Patagonia all the way up into Peru, and just about every flower color. John Watson and Anita Flores have published a monograph on these in the Scottish Rock Garden Club journal recently. And it's free. You can take a look at it or download it for free. Here we are again, a little bit different. Flower color is a little different. It's in full sun, so you get a better idea of what it looks like. And now we're headed over this way to Zapala from Villa Pahinha. We'll go through Primeros Pinos and all this area. Here's Calendrina affinis, Loesia relative. There's quite a number of Calendrinas, different species in Patagonia and further north in northern Argentina as well. Just a beautiful plant, comes in many different colors, and it does look a lot like a Loesia, doesn't it? Another Oxalis Adenophylla. Remember I said that the flowers could be very dark pink, and these are not only very dark pink, but they're much larger than the ones we saw at Cerro Catedral. I would imagine this has been in cultivation for a while, but I think it's going to become more and more popular because it's one of the few bulb oxalises that we can easily grow in our rock gardens. Another fabulous cactus, Malwinia Popiki. This one forms a huge mat. It grows both in Chile and Argentina. And you can see these wonderful sulfur yellow flowers. This can also be apomictic. There's one in the Apex Garden here in Denver that sets seed without being crossed. So you can grow this in your garden. This mat is 6 feet across, easy. See how tight it is, how congested it is. It's a wonderful bun plant. This is the hardiest of the Patagonian cacti, so anybody can grow this. Another viola, pardon me. This is Viola Coronifera. It has orange flowers. We wanted to see this in bloom, but unfortunately it had finished. So this is the best we can do. We've got a nice little clump here. You can see how different it is from the other ones. So they are quite different. They can be very different. And not just the flowers, but the rosettes and the shape of the leaves and the rosettes and so forth. Here's one of the mini calceolarias we saw. This is Polyrhiza. And as it happened, this was a very windy day, so it was hard to get a good focusing picture, but I think you get the idea. Here's another Savia Pygma, another beautiful plant. Real low mat forming plant with these clusters of flowers held up from the little rosette stems. Everybody would want to grow this, I think. And look at the soil. This is really coarse volcanic. We're closer to the volcano now, Kapale. Another thing we saw, another Calendrina, is Scottsburgi. These beautiful red-orange flowers and the yellow stigmas and yellow filaments, and look at this. Isn't this wonderful? Here's another one, Adisma corymbosa. A lot of Adismias, but this is probably the lowest growing one we saw. And again, this would make a great rock garden plant. You can see how beautiful this member of the pea family is. There's probably 60 or 70 different species in Patagonia. Another Viola, Trocularis. Again, this looks similar to Volcanica, but the flowers are a little bit different. Here's one of our fabulous plants that we saw just out in the steppe as we were going from one place to another. This is an Arthrophyllum strigulapedalum. And look at this, another member of the pea family. This is a big bun covered with flowers in bloom. And here it is looking towards the mountains, and you can see all these wonderful cushions just growing out of the ground. I'd love to have this in my garden. Now we're at Laguna Blanca, which is a national park on the way to Zapala. It's not, I would say, for national parks, there's other places in Argentina that are much more spectacular than this, but for whatever reason, it is a national park, and it certainly does have unusual plants. Foremost among them is Pterocactus aracanus. Pterocacti, most of their plant is below ground. They have huge tuberous roots that can be a foot long. And then tiny little stems stick up and you get these fabulous flowers. This is, Arcanus probably has the most beautiful flower of all the pterocactus. There's 7 to 9 species, depending on who the botanist is. And here's one in bloom, not in bloom. You can see these little fingers, these little stems sticking up. Just very attractive, even not in bloom. And these pterocacti, most of them are hardy in the Denver area, so something to look forward to. Seeds available in Europe, but not in this country. This is another plant we saw that's just fabulous, Argilia Bustalosi. And these flowers are almost 3 inches across. It's a little low-growing shrublet, basically. Just fabulous. No, this isn't really in cultivation, but I hope it will be someday. Another viola, Tectiflora. And look at this, it's growing, looks like it's growing in soil that's been inundated with a salt and pepper shaker. This volcanic soil is really colorful, black and white, and it really matches the texture and the color of the rosette. Look at this, tiny little flowers and these really intricate fractal designs of the rosettes are hard to beat. This is an annual or a biannual, but who cares? I would grow this in a minute if I could get it. All right, now we're headed up to, we've come up through Zapala, through this way, and now we're headed up to Caviawe and Kapale. Here's that volcano that's caused all the problems over the past number of years. Volcan Kapale, it's right on the border of Argentina and Chile, like most of the volcanoes. And this did cause some problems in Bariloche when it erupted. And remember, Bariloche is way to the south here. So this was a big volcanic eruption, and for several years. So here it is. We're looking up at Kapale, and this is the town of Caviawe. And you can see it's a little ski area. They've got a lake. And this town was completely wiped out by the volcanic eruption. So pretty much everything you see has come back since 2013. And right in the middle of town, you have Araucaria Forest and these beautiful Viola Pachysomas. And this is actually in an area that's slated for development to build more apartment buildings, unfortunately. But they're pretty common, so they're not going to go extinct or anything. But this is just great. I mean, this is about a foot across. Nothing's really in heavy bloom here. This is the other viola that grows in the area. This is, which one is this? Sacculus, I believe. No, it's Pachysoma, excuse me. This is Pachysoma. Quite different looking if you look at it again. Here's Pachysoma. So this one is Cotyledon. Here's Calendrina Colchaguensis, another Calendrina Lewisia relative, but look at the leaves. They're quite different from Aphanis. Beautiful colored flowers. These flowers can get much deeper colored than this too. Here we are at Kapale, and this is a hot springs resort. And here's Patrice and Paniodi and Marcella and Stephen Brack over here looking at the area. Big entrance here. I guess it is a big tourist area. While we were there, busloads of Argentines were coming in to take the hot waters. And Paniodi and Algeres also took the hot mud bath, which I guess they liked it, but it was hard to get the sulfur smell out of their clothes. So here we are. Here's our plants. So Cotyledon and Pachysoma hybridize with one another and produce Viola X Blaxlandiae. So pretty spectacular. And it's hard to believe that this plant comes from these two when you look at their flower colors, but it does. So you can see the difference in the rosettes. These are real tight, congested rosettes. These are laxer, and these are a little bit in between. Here's another Zephyranthes, Arakana. Here's a pollinator beetle getting ready to enter the flower. And here's that Jurassic Park setting that you saw on the opening screen. These columnar basalts, flow basalts that as the basalt cools, it forms these random polygons and then they give rise to the columns. And then here's the Arakana. And this probably hasn't changed. This looks the same as it did 50 million years ago. Here's a large Malwinia Patagonica clump. In some places in Patagonia, this is the dominant plant. This is about 3 feet high and about 4 or 5 feet across, and an unknown grass sort of giving it a background. These were not in bloom here, unfortunately. Here's another one of these wonderful Austral Cactus. This is still Coxy, but look at the red spines. It's just stunning to see this. The spines can be white, red, or yellow, and then the flowers can be sort of orange with a fiery yellow sitter. But again, just fabulous. And this is a big plant. This is over 3 feet across. All right, now we're coming back down to the town of Chomalao. And we've got a lot of things to see on this road, so let's get to it. Here's Volcan Tromen, which is outside of Chomalao. And this is a very recent volcanic eruption. This is similar to the A'a volcanic lava that you see in Hawaii. Really spiky, hard to walk on. You don't want to walk on this, actually. This flow is only about 200 years old. And so as it weathers and breaks down, then this will be populated by various plant life. But right now, after 200 years, it's still naked. And of course, this is the volcano right here. Here's a couple more cacti that are of interest. Malweniopsis darwini and Malweniopsis platyacantha. Platyacantha has spine clusters that are flat and radiate out in the same plane. And then Darwini they go all over the place, but they both have deep orange flowers. I grow both of these in my garden and have for many years. Very hardy. They can take well below 0 with no protection, and well worth growing. Here's another form of Malwinia Popiki. This is the tightest one I saw. We're over 7,000 feet at this elevation, so that probably has something to do with it. But just amazing. It's hard to even believe that it can grow this tightly as a bun, but it does. Here's Marcella with a pair of sheep horns, giving us all a big laugh. I can't say enough about what a wonderful guide Marcella is. If you ever have a chance to go to Patagonia and on a trip led by her, you should take it, like we did. Just a little bit about that. We got in right after Argentina had opened up on November 1st. We were there on November 27th. We got from Buenos Aires to Bariloche, no problem. There were no tourists. I mean, we had the country to ourselves, basically, and it was fabulous. I mean, I guess that was one benefit of traveling during epidemic times, is that the tourism was low. This was something we saw a lot of on our trip, gauchos and their dogs, herding goats mostly. And this gaucho has just received a care package for lunch from Marcella and Marie. And they were always looking out for the gauchos. Every time they saw one, they'd run out, give them a box or a sack full of food, and they were very grateful for it. So I think this is a local tradition. This is feeding the gauchos is something you're supposed to do, and Marcella was very good at it. And here's our favorite store in the whole country, the Gaucho Store. Here we were able to buy all kinds of gaucho-related items. I got paniotti and I got belts. Some people got hats. I even got a pair of gaucho slippers, which seemed pretty novel to me. And you could get mate mugs. This is what this is, the local tea that's made, that comes from northern Argentina, that you sip out of this mug. I didn't try it. I tried it when I was in Argentina before. It's very bitter, so. All right, so now we're still in the Chomalao area. We're going to go up to this Lagunas of Polaquien, and this is a national park as well. We saw some wonderful plants here, and it just opened like the day before we got there, so we were very fortunate to get in there. Here's one of the highlights, Viola rubromarginata, just a fabulous rhodulate violet. It is a succulent. Just delightful in every respect. And look at the coarse gravel it's growing in. I mean, just growing on outwash from the glacier, basically. Here's a close-up. Glenn took a nice close-up of this plant. You can see why it's such a desirable thing. Here's the lake and the mountains behind it, which are on the Chilean border. Just an aside on the Chilean-Argentine border, because I didn't know this from before, their famous explorer and surveyor, Perito Moreno, has a glacier named after him and a lake and maybe other things too, came up with the idea that they would survey the highest mountains between Argentina and Chile, then they would set the boundary of the two countries right at that point on the highest peaks, all the way up and down. So he's the one in charge of that, and he's a national hero because Argentina and Chile have not always gotten along. They fought wars, and his intelligence and knowledge and ability to do this prevented another war. So Perito Moreno. Here's a wonderful Austral Cactus. This is a different species. It's affinity hibernus and could be a subspecies robustior. But anyway, you can see the spines are quite different. The flower is quite different. Hibernus further north looks much different than this. So the taxonomy on Austral Cactus has not been worked out yet. Roberto Kiesling, who's one of the preeminent Patagonian botanists, is working on this now. So we'll probably have some clarification in the next few years. Right now, there's about 20 different species of Austral Cactus, and there's probably not quite that many. And finally, here's Glenn and Marie. We did have to wear a mask anytime we went inside in Argentina, but they look pretty good with these gaucho hats, don't you think? So if you're going to wear a mask, you might as well wear a gaucho hat with it. Thank you very much. All right, Penny, is that good? Oh, you're muted.
Yes, thank you very much, Rod. It was really fun watching it again, and we'll stop the recording and make sure that we have a chance to. Where do we go here? Yes, we are going to stop recording to the cloud.